Hello, and welcome back to Method News, where we talk about science-based manifestation methods and concepts. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're into this topic. Let's get started. Today we're talking about changing your behavior patterns to manifest your desires. So, why do we do what we do? We are biological survival systems, and our primary protocol is to stay alive, avoid pain, and seek success. And everything else aside from that is just extra programming. It's just extra icing from the systems we've interacted with, how we were raised in our culture, how we were raised in society, uh, and also the things we do, the rituals, the cycles that we've accepted and adopted. And our system wants to maintain this consistency. It's highly necessary because it uses a lot of energy to change these routines. It uses a lot of neuroplasticity, which is the physical rewiring of your brain. And even changing one small thing can trickle down in through other systems that they also have to update. So changing a belief requires a change in identity in your predictive system. And that belief can be tied to a lot of parts of your identity. And we have like our conscious mental identity scripts. I know who I am and I'm this type of person and I like these types of things, right? But we also have body identity scripts. And your body leads the charge when it comes to constructing your reality because that's where all the sensations are coming from that you're interpreting. These emotions and these feelings and all the things that are happening in our gut, where our gut is sending signals to our brain about our health and wellness, about, what's going on in our survival system through the vagus nerve, right? So we have a lot of hormones. We have a lot of, uh, stress hormones. We have feel good hormones that are running our automation. All of this stuff is run through our system before anything gets to our conscious mind. Quite a bit before. So all of the interpretations that we're making were really already made in assumptions, in these presets of our body and brain and our nervous system. And then we just interpret it that it must have been our idea because that's the only thing that makes sense to our story. So how do we get these body identity scripts? Well, it's really an emergent property of the system. The system naturally interacting with itself, trying to identify itself, trying to understand what it's doing. And this, by system, I mean the greater system of humanity, because we're all each small parts of the greater machine of humanity. We just don't have access to it by top level. It's kind of like being a bee in a really, really big hive, right? Where we have a sort of hive mind, but all of the hive minds have individual minds. So they're going off doing individual things with their individual bodies. And then sort of thinking that's, oh, I'm not really part of this. So we assign socially, and this is collectively, this is not any one person's fault. This is emergent cause and effect, basically, of people trying to figure out who to be, what to do, and how to update their identity systems in a constantly changing world, right? And this is why we often refer back to our earliest programs because they felt certain, they felt secure, they felt consistent, they felt safe, even if they were not actually safe. Anything that was consistent while we were developing became normal in a way, even if we consciously don't see it as normal. Our system still wants to default back to that unless it's been heavily updated in those areas. So if you grew up with people, caregivers or parents who were very manipulative or they really talked down to you, they tried to tear down your self-esteem, you would develop programs to adapt to those situations and those programs would become normal and they would signal safety. So they're always looking for the evidence of, okay, this must be coming so we can be ready for it, right? Even if it's a false positive and nobody's doing it. This becomes your identity structure and what you filter your reality as and what you generally will get more of because it's a sort of self-sustaining prophecy in the quantum area of things, right? Because in our society, while we are made up all of particles, our ideas are not. They're extensions of humanity. They're extensions of our physical bodies. They do not take on particle shape. Therefore, our interpretations literally shape things like words and ideas and numbers and concepts because they're not part of the physical particle structure. They're part of us collectively. Not, I don't have a whole monopoly on the word, transformation, but I can use that word to create transformation in myself based on the associations. This is another reason why, you know, um, repeating words and phrases, repeating affirmations, or repeating things reinforce new identity scripts. You're expanding what was already there, but you couldn't perceive. You're adding more to you. Trying to take away doesn't generally work because the brain doesn't like empty space. It doesn't have a protocol for empty space. And if something was there in your neurons, in your neural pathways, something needs to be there for, for the neural pathways to exist. They're going to fight to try to exist, right? And in some cases, our neural pathways die off because we don't use certain things, like doing math is one of those things. Riding a bike is usually not because it's actually a body awareness thing. It's an interoceptive thing. So it's not like math where you have to reinforce the thoughts themselves to keep them alive, right? You got to use 3 + 3 = 6 for your brain to, and you can unconsciously use these things too. You don't even have to consciously do it. Just like, yeah, 3 + 3 = 6, and it becomes a primary protocol. But if you don't do things like, advanced math and puzzles and the intricate pattern structure of the number of universe, you're just going to start forgetting what those protocols were. Same thing with identity. You'll forget what the formula was because you haven't been using it, right? So you can let things die off in that way, but aggressively trying to remove them, not usually good because it's like thinking of an elephant, right? Don't think of a pink elephant. First thing you think of is a pink elephant. You can't have empty space. If I said instead of a pink elephant, think of a blue monkey, right? Then that image might be more impressive to your mind and you might forget about the pink elephant as long as the monkey is interesting, right? As long as it's novel and interesting enough to your brain says, yeah, we can go along with this as long as it feels safe and feels like security and success. So reprogramming habits is really about cultivation. It's about cultivating the best possible conditions for your system to thrive in the new story, in the new identity protocol. This is how I feel about life. I love my house. I live in a house that I love. I love my relationship. I am in a relationship that I love and value and appreciate. And the gratitude, here's the difference when you think about wanting something versus loving something, having it already, right? When you think of something you want, you perceive that you don't have it. You get a drop in dopamine, which signals from your brain and body that you failed at something. And it makes you feel bad that you don't have it, as though you did something wrong or are something wrong, and creates shame and frustration and then resentment because why don't you have it? I don't have any proof of why I can't have it. But you can and you do. But you see how the cycle reinforces itself, you know? And the brain does tend to veer towards negative. It has a negative bias because it wants to survive. There might not be a lion in that bush, but if there is, we should run now, right? Because there could be. And if I decide there isn't one without knowing that there isn't one, it might attack, right? This is how the brain and nervous system operate. So changing the patterns takes patience. It takes consistency and repetition to form new neural pathways of familiarity. Because some new patterns are familiar, like they're easy to adapt because it's just like switching gears a little bit. But other ones, if you haven't been familiar with them, they're going to feel really dangerous, like something scary about them, something uncomfortable about changing them, right? So when you try to change a habit, especially if you try to take away something that gives you dopamine in some way, like say you try to quit smoking, right? You better have a really good dopamine fix waiting in place of it because it releases so much dopamine over the course of the day, but it also depletes dopamine. Other things do this too. Of course, anything addictive in this way can deplete your dopamine system so that you're not feeling it as good as you could be. It lowers your baseline for the enjoyment of sensation when you overuse it, right? It's kind of like wearing down a muscle too much. Now it just hurts. and it doesn't feel good anymore. It felt good at first to exercise, and now it hurts because you overdid it. So then you have to wait for the replenishment, and that can be like, it can lead to depression, anxiety, your body constantly feeling uncomfortable and you not knowing why. So you make up a bunch of interpretations mentally to try to compensate for that lack of understanding. Yeah, it sucks. It's a terrible cycle. And, you can break the cycle by perfecting that pause and noticing this is an old program. This is my body perceiving the old program. This is my dopamine level dropping. Now, counter, if you are focusing on gratitude, gratitude is the difference of I wanted this thing and I got more out of it than I even thought that I could or that I thought that I would get. Gratitude is the overabundance feeling of dopamine, like, oh, this was so much better than I thought it was going to be, right? So your brain's working on expectation and prediction all the time, and it wants to prove whatever it thinks is true about your survival, about your reality, and about who you are. It's looking for confirmation, right? But you need to counter any evidence that doesn't serve you, any limiting beliefs or limiting perceptions or distorted perceptions. Because sometimes a thing can be true, but it's not true enough because you didn't add enough to it. Like, I can say that I'm a really moody person, but I'm only really a moody person during certain times. So yes, it is true. At times I am a moody person, but I didn't add that part in that it's not all the time. And then I'm also a very abundant person, a very grateful person, a very loving and compassionate person, very supportive person to myself and others. I didn't add all the rest of that in. So a single truth by itself is not a complete story. And it's important to notice that when you're having thoughts about yourself, especially if those thoughts are making you feel uncomfortable emotions in your body. Your thoughts should always be supporting you, always have your back. It should never be tearing you down. The greater matrix is always going to try to tear down your identity and assimilate it because it wants cohesion and alignment, right? For the greater system. This is an emergent property. It's not malicious. But if you want to be independent, if you want to create your independent system of whatever experiences you want to have that you enjoy, you gotta at least partially break away from that greater system and say, no, I don't accept this, and I'm going to be this instead. So when you want to create a new behavior and you say, I'm going to quit smoking, remember that you want a replacement that replaces that dopamine, if that's a factor, right? If it's something that makes you feel really good, and it's part of your identity as in, I am a smoker, right? There's a lot that bleeds through into that identity, a lot image wise of yourself. And you're going to need to switch that over into something else. Like, I used to drink, but now I prefer adaptogens. So I became sort of like this identity of someone who's really interested in adaptogens because I replaced that old stuff that wasn't serving me and was, sometimes fun, but actually getting more and more not fun because it was making me feel physically like crap, right? Now I've replaced it with something that is fun, but also makes me feel good. I'm not saying you should try adaptogens. It's not an adaptogen commercial. The point is you need to replace it with something equivalent to your system as a reward, right? As a signal of success. So I hope this has helped you to understand a little bit more about how your behavior patterns work, how they manifest your reality, how they adjust your filters for what you can experience, and how to reprogram those things, how to reprogram your identity scripts. And, why we do the things we do. We're so automated. This is the thing. We are so automated, and understanding that when you're in observer mode, that is your time. That is your time to set the programming for the automation, because the rest of the time your brain's just running on autopilot like it's the movie Click, right? And whatever your things that you repeat the most, those becomes your primary options. They become your favorites, right? And they're run automatically without you even realizing that it's happening most of the time until you suddenly become, into observer mode. Now, doing mental check-ins, like reality checks all day too, can help. If you can build that habit, it takes a lot of mental energy to do that. But if you can build that habit to do reality checks, it's very beneficial to catch your program running, to notice, oh, I didn't actually choose that. This is just a program I'm running. Why did I say that? This is an unconscious programming I'm running that I need to address, right? And of course, if you yelled at somebody, maybe you should apologize, but we are still responsible for our automation. It's like a dog on a leash, right? We have a dog that we're not giving away because we are the dog also, but we're still responsible for the dog's automated process, in that whatever we have the power to adjust needs to be adjusted or addressed. Or if we need to, uh, fix whatever damage the dog did, then we try to replace that. So it doesn't absolve you from responsibility to understand that you're automated, but understanding that you're automated can help you realize that it is not you being bad. It is a program that is not serving you, an unconscious protocol that is not serving. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and sign up for the Method Muse newsletter in the description below.